Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Build-Ready Program Auction Request for Information webinar. Could you go to the next slide? My name is Emily Chesson, and I'm a Senior Development Associate with the Build-Ready Program. I basically am the Program Manager for our program, and I'm going to be one of the main presenters on this webinar today. We want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to join us, and just want to go over a few housekeeping rules before we get started. So all participants are muted. The presenters are the only ones who will be unmuted during the webinar. You can submit questions through the Q&A chat box, and we have dedicated time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. So we'll do our best to get through the questions that you all have provided. And if we can't get through all of them, we will be providing a summary Q&A document that will be posted to the Build-Ready program webpage after the webinar. And so we'll be following up with all participants after the webinar once the document is posted with the summary of answers. We're also recording this webinar, and the recording of the webinar along with the slides will be posted to the Build-Ready program webpage as well. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and get started. So as I said, my name's Emily Chesson, and I am the Senior Development Associate with the Build-Ready program. I'm going to be one of the main presenters today, along with my colleague Tracy DeRuger, who is a project manager with Build-Ready, leading our site development and particularly providing expertise in the permitting of projects. Two of my other colleagues who won't be presenting today, but may or may not be speaking, depending on the questions we get, are Harrison Kim. He is a project manager with the Build-Ready program, leading our prospecting work for the program. And then also Tom King, who is our internal senior counsel at NYSERDA and provides guidance and advice to us on legal issues related to our program. Next slide. So today we hope to cover a little bit of just background and progress to date on the Build-Ready program. We'll then launch into the auction RFI. We'll go over Part A of the RFI, the Build-Ready auction process, which I will cover, and then I'll turn it over to Tracy to go over Part B, the auction part that covers BR Benson Mine Solar Project. She's the project manager of that project. We'll then go over the instructions for submitting your responses to the RFI, and then finally have some time for question and answer. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background on the program. Our program was established in April of 2020 through the Accelerated Renewable Energy Growth and Community Benefit Act. It directs NYSERDA to identify, assess, and facilitate the development of suitable sites for renewable power generating facilities, giving priority to previously developed sites and existing or abandoned commercial sites, such as brownfields, landfills, or other disused or underutilized sites. After the program was established through the law in April of 2020, we then began working on developing the program. We submitted our petition in June of 2020 to the Public Service Commission. The Build-Ready order was issued by the Public Service Commission in October of 2020. And that's when we really started implementing the program. We submitted our implementation plan in January of 2021. And in April of 2021, the program was fully staffed. We had procured competitively consultants to support us with prospecting, environmental engineering, interconnection, and legal services. We submitted our first annual report to the Public Service Commission and really began accelerating the program implementation. And then as of this year, as of last month, we launched our first request for information focused on the auction process for the Build-Ready program. And we continue to accelerate implementation to date. So overall, we really view our mission as a program is to deliver community benefits by turning difficult sites into build-ready renewable energy sites to be competitively auctioned and transferred to the private sector for final development, construction, and operation. Next slide. So what do we do? How do we do it? And what do we view as our value add? So the figure on The right-hand side provides a high-level overview of how we identify, advance sites, and then bring them to auction. So really what we go out and do is we identify, assess, and advance what we would consider difficult sites that the private sector would not normally consider for renewable energy development. We advance them through various stages of assessment and development, and then we competitively auction and transfer them to the private sector for final development, construction, and operation. So we identify sites both through a top-down and bottom-up approach. From a top-down perspective, we take a statewide screening effort to identify sites based on screening criteria that we've identified for the program. We also accept nominations for sites from state agencies, the public, and various other outlets. We then screen and assess the sites, and if they are continuing to look good and there's landowner interest and community interest in the project, we then continue advancing the sites through further stages of diligence. This includes obtaining site control, the required permits, the interconnection process, developing host community agreements, identifying various ways we can limit developer liability to continue de-risk these sites for the private sector. And then if the site continues to look good, we will progress the site to auction, where then it will be competitively awarded and transferred to a private developer to finalize the development steps, construct, operate, and maintain the project. And we really view the value that our program brings is that we complement the private sector efforts by pursuing sites the private sector would not traditionally identify in advance, maybe because of cost or risk or complexity associated with that site. We're able to provide patient capital and take the time that's needed to coordinate across various government agencies from the local level to the state level to the federal level to unlock these sites, limit liability, and continue to prioritize community benefits. And because we're NYSERDA, we're also able to provide financial support and incentives to the private sector when we take a site out for auction by offering developers a 20-year renewable energy certificate, a REC agreement with a project. And so that's something that is very unique that we can do as NYSERDA. Next slide. So we are a small team, but we are supported by a network of competitively procured consultants that will continue to grow to meet the various needs of our projects as they're identified and advanced. And so just wanted to provide an overview of who we're working with. So supporting our prospecting and community engagement needs in the upstate region, so New York regions 1 through 8, is Labella, supported by Land Solutions and the Center for Creative Land Recycling. In the downstate region, so for New York City and Long Island, we're working with the Clearview Group on prospecting and community engagement. For our environmental engineering support services, we're working with TRC. For interconnection, PowerGem, and for various legal needs, we're working with Bond, Schoenig, and King, and Sive, Paget, and Riesel. Next slide. So just a brief overview of some of our results and efforts to date. So we've screened over 5,000 sites across the state for suitability with a focus on solar PV. We are currently progressing about 30 top-ranked sites through more advanced assessment and development. The sites are at different stages of assessment and development, from site control to interconnection analysis and within and in the interconnection queue. And at different stages of permitting. Our sites are a mix of contaminated sites, commercial industrial sites, mines, vacant and underutilized sites, electric generating stations that have been closed, and they're also a mix of both privately and publicly owned land. Most of our sites can host a solar PV project around 5 to 20 megawatts. And in general, we face similar constraints that the private sector faces when we're identifying and trying to advance projects. And most of the sites are not advancing due to insufficient buildable area, lack of landowner interest, interconnection infeasibility, environmental issues that we just can't overcome, overlap with an ag district or a particular agricultural use that we can't deconflict or manage, or there might be some sort of preferred non-energy use for the site, and so they just have other plans for it outside of what Build-Ready could offer. If you want to learn more about what we've been up to, we did just submit our second annual progress report to the Public Service Commission that provides our progress for the year of 2021 last month. So you can access the report through this link on this slide. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to get more into the details of the auction itself. So the overall purpose of the auction is we're really issuing this to gather feedback from solar PV developers, owners, operators, and investors with three main goals in mind. The first is to better understand the most attractive time in the development process to auction a Build-Ready project. The second is try to foster significant interest from the private sector that results in competitive auctions and successful construction and operation of Build-Ready projects. And our third goal is to solicit interest in a voluntary market advisory group that the program can engage with from time to time to gather feedback. Next slide. So why should you consider participating in this RFI? We know that people are very busy and have a lot of priorities, but we really view this as a great opportunity for the private sector to provide feedback on the Build-Ready auction process at an early stage, including when and how projects are auctioned and transferred. So solar PV developers, owners, operators, investors that might be interested in potentially acquiring a Build-Ready project should consider responding to this RFI and providing your feedback. And we also just want to note that whether you decide to respond to this RFI or not, it won't impact your organization's ability to eventually participate in a future Build-Ready auction. Next slide. So if you've taken a look at our RFI documents, or if you haven't, here's just a little bit of background of how it's structured. We've structured the RFI into two main parts. The first part, Part A, is really focused on the overall auction process. We lay out a detailed proposal of how we envision running an auction, and then we have a series of questions on the auction process for you to respond to. Then the second part of the RFI is focused on the Build-Ready or BR Benson Mine Solar project. We've provided a package of information related to the project and then a series of questions on the project to help better inform how far and how we continue to advance this project before auction. Next slide. So if you visit NYSERDA's webpage, either through the Build-Ready program website or through our solicitation section of NYSERDA's website, you'll see a host of documents associated with our RFI. So the first is the overall general request for information document that's going to lay out a lot of the information I just went through. It will have the links to all of the relevant documents and then also includes the questions that we're looking for feedback on for Part A and Part B. To respond to Part A section of the RFI, you'll want to read Appendix 1. This is where we outline the proposed auction process. For Part B of the RFI, where we're focused on the Benson Mine Solar project, we have a number of appendices to review before responding to the questions included in the RFI. So we have Appendix 2, which is a solar project information memo that we've prepared on the project that provides a summary of the project to date and where the different development milestones stand. Appendix 3 is the project design set. Appendix 4 is a geotechnical investigation report. Appendix 5 is the landscape development plan. Appendix 6 is the wetland delineation report. Appendix 7 is the Adirondack Park Agency solar generation facility permit application that we submitted. And Appendix 8 is an independent interconnection feasibility report that we commissioned. So once you've reviewed the documents, you can then respond to the questions via Attachment A, the Build-Ready RFI response template. Once you've filled that out, you would then submit your responses online. A few key dates. So If you want to speak to us more about the RFI documents or have any specific questions for us, you can submit a request for discussion with the program by May 23rd. And then the responses are due online and must be uploaded by June 6, 2022 at 3 p.m. Next slide, please. Next slide. So now I'm going to really talk through in a little bit more detail what we cover in Part A of the RFI. So as I said, the main document is Appendix 1, which covers the Build-Ready auction process. So the way the document is structured is we have just a little bit of background on the program. Then we talk about how we would prepare a project for auction. And what we propose is that we would do a request for information on a project very similar to what we're doing right now for the Benson Mines solar project, where we're going to be sharing basic information on the project, asking some specific questions to gather feedback to help inform the further development of the project and when we will take it out for auction and how we'll do so. Then once we've incorporated that feedback and the project is ready for auction, we will launch a request for proposal process for the competitive auction. We're going to be seeking proposers to provide the full suite of development, finance, own, and operate services for a project. We're going to permit teaming or joint venturing to provide the full suite of services we're going to be looking for. This will be what we're outlining right now, at least, is that it will be a two-step process. The first step will be an eligibility application. This is going to be a qualifying step where prospective proposers must provide evidence that they meet specific eligibility criteria. And the second step will then be a bid proposal where those who pass the eligibility application stage will be invited to submit a competitive bid proposal that we will examine and evaluate based on non-price and price factors. We'll then select an awarded developer and we will then work to transfer the project to the awarded developer. So the RFI talks through the initial project transfer steps, the post-transfer project monitoring and reporting, and then has an exhibit that provides a little bit more information on one of the pieces of the process. Next slide, please. So just to provide a little bit more detail on the competitive auction piece, the request for proposal, I mentioned that we are anticipating having a first step, which would be the eligibility application. In Appendix 1, we outline right now what we're currently thinking would be the information we'd be requesting. So what's outlined in there is we'll be asking information on the organization, description and structure, the project team description and structure, including project team key personnel, design minimum thresholds, construction minimum thresholds, including bonding capacity and the safety history of the company, project references, financial qualifications, a typical quality assurance plan, and a certificate of insurance. So we'll review the information that's provided, and if deemed eligible, applicants will receive a notice of qualification saying you've been qualified to move on to step 2, and that will provide the proposers with a description of and access to the process and forms to be submitted for a step 2 bid proposal. If you're deemed ineligible, you would not be able to apply for that auction, for that specific project, but you could reapply for future Build-Ready auctions. Next slide, please. And so with step 2, the actual bid proposal, we'd be asking for both non-price and price information and evaluating the information that's provided. So what we've outlined in Appendix 1 thus far that we'd be considering requesting would be a project execution plan that's going to describe how you're going to take the project from where it is when it's transferred to you through any remaining development steps, financing, construction, operation, and maintenance. Any changes or updates to your project team that you proposed in an eligibility stage, a project schedule, a financing plan and project budget through declaration of commercial operation, community engagement plan, a markup of the contracts that are included in the RFP flagging any potential issues or concerns, any new or additional incremental economic benefits that could be provided, and any involvement of MWBEs, SDVOBs, and disadvantaged communities within the project. For the price factors, there will be the rec bid price, which the proposal will be offering to NYSERDA as part of their proposal. The project development cost, this is going to be the dollar amount to be paid by the project developer to NYSERDA for the project site based on the actual expenses that we have incurred. This will be set by NYSERDA and will be accepted by the proposer. And then a project bid fee, which will also be set by NYSERDA and ensures that we recoup a portion of the administrative costs associated with the project. And that will also be set by NYSERDA when will be accepted by the proposer. Next slide, please. So that's a bit of detail of what's actually in Appendix 1. But one of the main things that we're trying to do is actually get feedback on the auction process. So I want to just quickly review some of the key questions that we've outlined in the RFI and that we're really looking to get your feedback on. So one is related to the project development milestones for our projects. At the end of the day, we have a lot of flexibility in how far we take these projects down and into development. And so we want to hear from you, how far should we consider taking a project through development prior to auction? And so we have a set of questions that we've developed related to different development milestones, including site control, interconnection, permitting, pilots, and host community agreements that we'd love your feedback on. And we'd also like you to consider how project size might impact how far our program should consider taking a project through development. As I mentioned before, right now, most of our projects are somewhere between the 5 to 20 megawatt AC range for solar PV. We might have some larger ones, we might have some smaller ones, but this is kind of where most of our projects are landing right now. So given that, how would that impact your answer? Next slide, please. We're also looking to get your feedback on the REC agreement and structure. So we have the flexibility to include a REC agreement and package it with every project, or we don't have to. And so we're really looking to hear from the community on how we should be considering and when we should be considering including a REC agreement and maybe when we shouldn't be, and how project size would impact your answer. We're also looking to get feedback on preference towards the REC pricing structure, whether we should be requiring a fixed or index or leaving it up to the proposer to tell us what is going to be best for them. And so this is just a couple samples of some of the questions we have related to the REC agreement and structure. Next slide, please. We also want to hear from you about how your interest in participating in an auction would be influenced about whether we're going to be auctioning a single project or potentially a portfolio of projects, and how the potential project size of an individual project or portfolio of projects would impact your interest in participating in an auction. Next slide, please. And then we're looking to get feedback from you all on the process that we've outlined for the competitive request for proposal. As I mentioned before, we're envisioning 2 steps. And so we want to hear your reaction to the 2-step process. And from what we've outlined, would you participate in an RFP? Would you want to bid for one of our projects or a portfolio of our projects? For step 1, it'd be helpful to have feedback on the eligibility requirements that we've outlined, and again, how project size might impact your answer. And for step 2, particularly, we're looking for feedback on the process that we've outlined, the non-price and price requirements that we've outlined, and also our potential draft schedule for the RFP and the eventual award and transfer of the project. You can see it outlined here to the right. So is this too long, too short? Are there areas where you would want us to tighten it up or lengthen it out to meet various needs? And again, how does project size impact your answers? Next slide, please. And then we have some questions related to project transfer. In particular, we're interested in understanding any issues or concerns that you would have related to the project transfer process we've outlined, especially any that could lead to a protracted close. We're also considering battery storage for a number of our projects, so looking to get some feedback on how we should consider treating and pairing battery storage with our projects in the project design and development stages. And then we just have an opportunity for some general feedback on different subject areas or other feedback from you all. One question in particular to highlight is if we were to pursue even smaller projects in 5 megawatt AC, how you would suggest we consider advancing and auctioning those smaller sites. Next slide, please. So that is the overview of Part A of the Build-Ready Auction RFI, some of the main details and questions that we're looking for feedback on. And so with that, I'm going to transition over to my colleague Tracy to present on Part B of the RFI on the BR Benson Mine Solar Project. So Tracy, over to you.
Thank you, Emily, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you all presenting more information about Build-Ready's first project, the BR Benson Mine Solar Project. During this part of the webinar, I'll provide a site overview, a summary of our project diligence, as well as reflect on some of the questions we have included in our RFI relevant to each development area. Next slide, please. The BR Benson Mine Solar Project. We have a potential 20 megawatt project located within the town of Clifton and St. Lawrence County within the Adirondack Park. NYSERDA formed BR Project 1 LLC as Build-Ready's first single-purpose project holding company pursuant to the authority provided by the legislator under Public Authority Law, Section 1902, Subdivision 5. Under this law, NYSERDA forms LLCs to acquire project development rights, making it much easier to transfer those rights through a membership interest purchase and sale agreement with the project auction winner. NYSERDA has entered into a lease option agreement with Benson Mines Incorporated after a satisfactory diligence period. As part of this diligence, we investigated the site and surrounding areas Superfund status listings and related remedial information. The site and surrounding areas have a rich industrial history. Benson Mines Incorporated and its predecessor companies have owned mineral and timber rights interests in St. Lawrence County since 1883. In 1941, with the outbreak of World War II, a 50-year lease was arranged with J&L Steel Corporation. North of the proposed solar project was once the largest open-pit magnetite mine in the world. J&L Steel operated the venture for roughly 35 years until a recession in the world's iron and steel industry caused the operation to be shut down in 1978. In 1988, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation was notified that an oil spill had occurred near Benson Mines, which was later referred to the EPA in late 2013. In the meantime, in 2004, St. Lawrence County applied to DEC's Environmental Restoration Program for funds to build upon prior assessments and complete additional site investigations to determine potential contamination and remedial needs. As an outcome of this assessment, in 2013, the DEC issued a record of decision, more commonly called a ROD. This ROD clarified that no further cleanup was required for an approximate 14-acre portion of the site north of our array. Following completion of the ROD, the county, the DEC, and the EPA have continued to work together to address environmental conditions outside of the 14 acres. However, there's no site management plan, environmental or institutional controls for our proposed solar project located on the tailings pile with no known contamination. The proposed interconnection facilities adjacent to the existing substation would require the future developer to submit a change of use form required by 6 NYSERDA Part 375 and comply with existing site management plans. Build-Ready has discussed this issue with the DEC representatives as well as this being communicated in our APA application. Our APA application was submitted this year in March. Relatedly, we've held conversations and will continue to hold conversations with the town of Clifton, St. Lawrence County, and the community with respect to host community benefits. Currently, a snowmobile trail traverses the area where the array is proposed. We have engaged the local snowmobile club, and we see viable reroute options that can be accommodated. With this overview, I'd like to summarize a few additional project highlights on the next slide, please. Build-Ready has followed industry standards and requirements for renewable development in New York State, starting with our initial screening and critical issue assessment and continuing with our more in-depth studies. This site continues to check the boxes. The Benson Mines site presents an opportunity to develop approximately 180 acres southward facing slope within the Adirondack Park. The majority of the project features would be sited on the tailings piles, with the adjacent point of interconnection electrical infrastructure directly north of the site across Route 3. With interested landowner and municipal stakeholders, the Benson Mine Properties was an excellent first build-ready site to advance. The image here shown on the right side is an excerpt from our plan set that was used to submit into our APA application. It contemplates utilizing the existing access road off of Route 3 with the array covering the majority of the tailings pile. An APA wetland boundary buffer is maintained between the confirmed APA wetland boundary line and our project's proposed limit of disturbance along the southern boundary of the lease area. As such, no wetland permits are anticipated. The gen tie is proposed to be buried in the right-of-way north of the existing access road. We anticipate that this collection line would be buried under Route 3 in daylight on the Benson Mines property adjacent to the existing substation, which we are on our currently leased area. Over the next few slides, I have some site visits photographs that I'd like to show that may provide additional context on the site. Next slide, please. The majority of our site where the array is proposed is a successional shrubland with limited grading and clearing required. The APA has conducted 2 site visits as part of the project review thus far to provide not only wetland boundary verification, but to assess the potential tree clearing impacts or lack of. Next slide, please. The proposed laydown area is shown on the left side. This picture also shows the sandy conditions that exist in many portions of the site. The right side picture is the area adjacent to the existing substation on Route 3, where we anticipate our project's interconnection facilities to be located. Shown in the background of this picture is also Route 3, and kind of looks into where our solar site would be through the tree line. On that note, the APA and us, our consultants, have indicated preliminary visual impact assessments are limited visibility. Next slide, please. Now I hope I've given you kind of an overview of our site and diligence today, and I kind of would like to discuss more of our milestones as well as some of the findings of our diligence. The schedule shown here presents our common milestones in the Build-Ready development cycle for BR Project 1 LLC. The majority of 2021 was focused on diligence, site control activities, and gearing up for the NYSO small generator application process. In 2022, we filed and will continue to file our required permits and approvals, but more specifically with the local municipalities and the APA. We anticipate the NYSO system impact study being issued back to us in Q4 2022. As the schedule notes, we anticipate getting further developer feedback through our RFI and future market advisory group, which may inform how we structure the later stages of our project development lifecycle, most notably around the completion of this NYSO process and the host community engagement pilot agreement execution. With the schedule presented, I will provide more information about each of the diligence steps taken on the next few slides, as well as present some common RFI questions. Next slide, please. First up, site control. NYSERDA's lease option with Benson Mines contemplates an option period. Currently, this option period can be extended on an annual basis until April 5th, 2024. As part of our standard lease option template, we also anticipate a 5-year maximum construction term, as well as a 20-year operating lease term with 3 additional 5-year extensions. On the right side of the screen are example RFI questions related to site control we're looking for your feedback on. For instance, is there a preferred structure for lease rates? Do we prefer a fixed rate, escalations by a fixed percentage, or by another escalation methodology? And what would you consider an acceptable range for lease rates per acre for solar development? Next slide, please. Once we have secured site control and conducted a certain level of diligence and design, we advance our interconnection work stream. This project is located within the National Grid territory, and as mentioned earlier, we are anticipating a tap off the Browns Falls to Newtons Falls 34.5 kV sub-transmission line. We completed our pre-application report with NYSO and also completed an independent feasibility report which indicated the need for reconductoring and transformer upgrades. Upon receiving our updated estimates to perform these upgrades, we advanced our electrical design, including preparation of a single line drawing and other data necessary to support our filing into the NYSO Small Gen interconnection application. In May 2021, we secured queue position 1166. We're hoping to hear from the market as to preferred project auction and transfer items associated with interconnection. For example, would you bid on a project that was in the middle of system impact study or feasibility study, or would you prefer to have these studies completed prior to taking auction? Additionally, we also are soliciting feedback on CTU upgrade related work. For instance, would the qualified bidder be able to or prefer to perform upgrades if allowed? Next slide, please. As part of the de-risking taken by Build-Ready, we completed several studies and assessments of the site to date to support future permits and approvals. This includes a boundary and topographic survey, wetland and RTE surveys, noise and visual impact assessments, a Phase 1 environmental site assessment, draft swipe plan, electric layout, amongst many other needs for our APA solar generation application. These studies will support the future Town of Clifton Site Plan Review Board, as well as St. Lawrence County's review of the project. The APA is in receipt of our permit application. To date, we have received minor comments, which we are in the process of resolving. The APA has completed site visits as mentioned. Based on the comments to date, we're hopeful that the permit is deemed complete this summer. The purpose of our LLC formation is in part to allow the final developer to utilize studies, permits, and approvals received to date. We envision the final developer obtaining any final permits or approvals required to construct, such as a speedies permit and a local building permit. As this is our first project, we want to hear from the market what you think about our project. If there's anything we can be doing differently. For instance, based on what's presented in the drawing set, are there additional items that we could consider to reduce project costs that would not minimize environmental compliance or system reliability? Additionally, we want to hear on what stage we should bring these projects to. For instance, would you prefer to have Build-Ready submit a project for approval, or would you prefer that process to be completed prior to us going to auction? These are many of the questions. There's many questions related to the permitting and auction transfer within our RFI, and we encourage you to provide your feedback. Next slide, please. Last and certainly not least is our benefits and community engagement. This is a critical item for the Build-Ready program. We typically consider these benefits from the construction, operation, and maintenance of the project, as well as lease and tax payments to local communities. We envision continuing pilot conversations with St. Lawrence County, incorporating the snowmobile trail reroute, and maintaining other options for host community benefits throughout this phase of the project. Throughout our RFI, we asked several questions regarding pilots. For instance, expectations for early and late stage negotiations, but did not request feedback on assessment methodologies. We also request information on preferences for working within the Real Property Tax Law 47 pilots versus working through IDA pilots. We also request information about pilot terms. We understand the development community is already working with host communities throughout the state, and we want to hear how Build-Ready could manage these early conversations and final negotiations, and how they could really be represented in the auction documents in the interim for Benson Mines as well as future projects. This concludes the portion of the webinar on the BR Benson Mines project. Thank you again for your time and participation, and I'll turn the presentation back to Emily, who will discuss final RFI instructions and key dates. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Next slide. Next slide. So we hope that through the information that both myself and Tracy have presented to you all today, that you are as excited about the Build-Ready program and our first project that we're bringing out to a public audience as we are. We really think it's an exciting opportunity for the private sector to participate and provide feedback early on in this process. So when we are bringing a project out for auction, we're following a process that is of interest and is streamlined and transparent. So it will make bidding as easily and attractive as possible, and will result in projects that are constructed and operating and are providing both clean energy to the state and benefits to these communities with these difficult and harder sites that, if it wasn't for this program, would likely not be moving into a renewable energy project. So thank you again for bearing with us and listening to what we have to share about the program and the specific Benson Mines project, and just some of the instructions for how you would actually respond. So once you've gone through the documents and information, you would then want to download and fill out Attachment A, the Build-Ready Auction RFI response template. This is just a snapshot of the Word document here. It's just a Word document. You would be typing in your answers to our questions. And then once you finish your responses, go on to the next slide. You then will submit your responses online. The image on the right-hand side of the screen is just a screenshot of what the actual online form looks like. So we're going to ask for some basic information about the organization and individual uploading the response. We are encouraging respondents to answer all questions in the RFI, and if you're not able to answer a question, just mark it NA. And just make sure you have all of your details complete before submitting your response, as our online form does not allow you to save your information and then come back and complete it at a different point and submit it. But again, it's just basic contact information we're getting on the form, and then you're just uploading the Attachment A itself. Once you submit your response, you'll receive a confirmation email, which will provide you with a tracking number, which you can then print or save, and then you can use that to reference your response if you have any questions for Build-Ready. Next slide, please. So again, some of the important upcoming dates. If you'd like to speak to us about anything within the auction process or the Benson Mines project that we've outlined within the auction documentation, you can request a conversation with us. The requests are due by May 23rd, so that we have enough time to schedule them and have them before the RFI responses are due. And the RFI responses are due on June 6th by 3 p.m. uploaded and submitted online. We will not be taking emailed responses. Some of the key email addresses and website links to access our documents are provided below. And again, these slides will be made available after this webinar, so you can get that information there as well. But if you have questions, you can submit them to build-ready-auction@nyserda.ny.gov. You can access the documents from the Build-Ready program webpage, and you can upload your responses via the seamless doc. Next slide, please. So with that, we want to move on to question and answer. We've gotten a couple questions, so we're going to see what we can answer. So the first question we got is in relation to my comment early on in the presentation. Is the 5 to 20 megawatt range that I mentioned our projects in AC or DC? It's in AC. seeing if any other questions are coming in. So we got a question asking if we could speak a little bit more about the pricing structure, specifically regarding the rec bid. So there's more detail in the RFI itself. What I would just say is that right now what we're considering is there's going to be three main factors to the pricing structure of a project. Two will be set by NYSERDA and one will be proposed by the proposer. So we as NYSERDA will be setting out the one part of the pricing will be what we're calling the project development cost. So that's going to be all of the costs that we've incurred as NYSERDA to date to advance the project. We're required by our order to recover the costs from the projects that we've developed. So we'll be setting out how much we've spent, and proposals will have to accept that cost and accept to pay NYSERDA for that cost. The second piece is a project bid fee, which will also be helping to recover some of the administrative costs associated with NYSERDA advancing the project. So that again will be a fee that we will be putting out there that the proposals will need to accept. And the third piece of the price structure will be the rec bid. So that will be coming from the proposers, telling us, NYSERDA, what you would need from a rec price to make the project financially viable. So we'll be evaluating those as they come in from the proposals, and it will be one of the criteria that we're evaluating for the proposals as we review them. We haven't made a decision yet on whether we're going to require proposals to provide a fixed rec or an index rec. If you're familiar with our Tier 1 solicitation process that takes place every year with NYSERDA, proposers propose their rec price bid in that, and so it will be a similar exercise with our auction process at this stage. And again, we haven't made a decision yet on whether we will require a specific rec structure or whether we'll leave that open to the proposers. And so that's something we're looking for feedback on. Another question is, will the slide deck be made available for download? Yes, the slides will be made available for download. I'm trying to see, oh, here's some more questions that came in. So we mentioned there's a possibility for some of the projects to be over 20 megawatts. How much more are any of the projects expected to be ORES permitted? So I don't have an exact figure to share with you right now, but we can follow up with some more statistics on our pipeline. But I do know that we do have several projects that we're looking at that are over the 20 megawatt capacity that we've been talking about. And are any of our projects expected to be ORES permitted? We would expect some projects to be ORES permitted if they fell within the above 20 megawatt or definitely above 25 megawatt range. But we'll follow the permitting process required for projects based on the capacity. Are there predetermined base, one of the questions, are there predetermined base rent lease rates the Build-Ready team offers landowners to secure sites for pre-development? We are offering market rates for the landowners through our lease option agreements. And so what we offer is comparable to what a private sector developer would be offering for a project site in that region of the state, given also and considering that some of our sites, are these more difficult contaminated sites. So the type of site is also factored into the rent lease offers that we're putting out there. There's a question related if any of our interconnection study results and cost estimates are available to bidders. Interconnection agreements executed. Would NYSERDA cover any of the interconnection costs? So the interconnection study results and cost estimates will be made available to bidders. We do not have any results from the system impact studies yet to provide, but they will be provided at the time of auctioning a project. One of the questions we are asking is whether we should consider executing the interconnection agreement or leaving that for the developers to do so. And then another question is, would NYSERDA cover any of the interconnection costs for a project? Again, I think this is all to be decided on a project by project basis and through the feedback process with the developers and through the eventual auction documentation that we put out to the market. So what other criteria is considered as part of awarding the winning bid besides price? Is there a percentage breakdown in criteria? So it's not just price. We, as I said, are going to be looking at non-price factors. I laid out what some of those are, and they are listed in Appendix 1 of the document, so you can go in and take a look. But it's includes, we will need a basically execution plan. So how you plan on getting the project from the point of development that we bring it to out to the market and sell it through any remaining development steps, financing, construction, and then operation and maintenance. We're also asking for a project schedule, for your project financing plan and budget, along with your community engagement plan. At the end of the day, it's really important for our program for these sites to actually be built. So I think for our program, the non-price factors are going to be very, very important for our evaluation of the bidders' proposals that we receive. Another question of what requirements will there be on who can make bids? So this is outlined in Appendix 1 of the RFI. As we noted earlier in the presentation, we anticipate a two-step process, the first step being an eligibility application. And so in the Appendix 1 document of the RFI, we lay out right now what we're considering the requirements that developers would need to meet to pass the eligibility round. If you pass the eligibility round, you're then able to move forward and provide us with a bid. So there's a question if a bidder, can a bidder be a solar developer, or must a developer partner with an EPC and owner in order to be eligible to bid? So right now, as it's outlined in the documentation for this request for information, again, this is an opportunity for us to get Feedback from the community is that we are anticipating we would expect developers to partner and bid with an EPC and owner to provide the full suite of development services for our projects. And then there also is a question of how would remediation be addressed if required? Would NYSERDA coordinate with NYSDEC, so Department of Environmental Conservation, or US EPA if needed? Yes, we are currently doing this right now on any of our sites that either are still being remediated or are remediated. And so we work really closely with the DEC region offices where our sites are located, and also with the EPA Region 2 office for some of the sites that we're working on right now. This has included getting comfort letter from the US EPA for the site related to some of the liability risks and coordinating with DEC. So yes, we are going to be doing our best to address remediation issues and site liability issues through the coordination with DEC and EPA. Are ballasted systems required for all sites? Actually, before I take that one, I don't know if Tracy, you want to add anything else on the EPA or DEC question?
Yeah, thanks, Emily. I think you hit it dead on the head. We would be coordinating with the EPA and the DEC, and I think, you know, equally important is for sites that are brownfields, you know, we do want to try to coordinate brownfield cleanup program activity, maybe to support an application into the DEC's brownfield cleanup program, if applicable. So, thank you. I think that's it.
So are ballasted systems required for all sites? No, I wouldn't say that they're going to be required for all sites. It's going to be a site by site. It's going to be dependent on the site and what the site requires. So I think that will be a site by site decision. For some sites, definitely, but maybe not necessarily for all sites. So we are at 2 o'clock. The webinar is supposed to go till about 2. We got some really great questions, and I think got through a lot of them. For the ones that we were not able to answer, we will include all of the questions in our summary Q&A response that will be posted. So you can look there for any questions that we weren't able to answer on the webinar. And again, just really want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to join our webinar, learn more about the Build-Ready program and our auction process that we're putting out for comment from the private sector. And we really look forward to your feedback, both on the overall process and our specific questions related to Benson mines, and hope you're also interested in participating in our market advisory group that we really look to use and are hopeful to use for our projects and program designs going forward. So with that, thank you very much for joining, and we look forward for this being the first of many conversations with all of you as our program and projects progress. Thank you very much.